Welcome back. This time we're talking about Timeless, Season 1, Episode 6, The Watergate Tape. Now, in my reviews for each of the previous two episodes, I mentioned how they had kind of gotten away from the long-term storylines and been spending more time developing our main characters, specifically our three heroes, as well as our primary villain. While Flynn's overall mission, as well as just exactly what Rittenhouse is, had been kind of secondary to those goals. Well, the Watergate tape definitely flipped the script because this was all about Rittenhouse, both in the present and the past, and we get to find out a lot of new information about pretty much everyone and just about all of my primary questions that I've been discussing in most of my reviews up until now. So let's dive right into this. Our heroes have to travel back to June 20th, 1972 to deal with the Watergate scandal, Nixon, and specifically the 18 and a half minutes missing from his famous tape that he recorded in the Oval Office. And it turns out everyone wants that missing segment of the tape. Not only Flynn, but also Rittenhouse. Because we see in the opening moments of the episode, at first we get a nice glimpse of Rufus and his family. And considering that they've been threatened by Rittenhouse multiple times, it's really no surprise that he gets a call from Connor. When he goes outside, it's not only Connor, but our Rittenhouse rep that had threatened him earlier. And this is the first clue that this episode is going to be quite different than the previous two, because the Rittenhouse guy actually gives him a mission to do in the past, specifically to get his hands on this tape to make sure not only Flynn doesn't see it, but none of his companions do as well. And not only that, he gives him a number to call in the past to report to Rittenhouse on his progress, which just opens up so many paradox possibilities and self-creating events. But for now, let's stick with 1972 and our hero's mission, which is to stop Flynn. They arrive at the White House with press credentials, but before they can even get through the gate, they're all attacked and kidnapped by Flynn and his men. And unfortunately for Rufus's mission, he promptly plays a portion of the missing tape, in which Nixon talks about Rittenhouse, and he's scared of Rittenhouse. And this is Nixon we're talking about. And he keeps mentioning this doc and how he wants to get his hands on it. And so does Flynn. So he lets Lucy and Rufus go, keeping Wyatt as insurance, telling them that they have 5 hours to get the doc and bring it back to him or Wyatt's dead. But not before revealing Lucy's secret about his journal, which is her journal, and he mentions specifically that it's her journal from several years in the future. If you've watched my previous videos, you've known that I've been kind of curious about exactly when this journal exists. Literally when. And now we know it's several years in the future, so we don't have to expect her to start writing it now. She was apparently writing in the future her recollections of this time. Of course, this revelation does not sit well with Wyatt at all because he feels now he can't trust Lucy. But I did find it interesting that Flynn talks about how they're actually like pals and like teammates later on, him and Lucy. So again, they're doing a good job of teasing things that have not yet happened. And hopefully the show is actually going to survive long enough for us to find out how this is all going to play out. But for now, Lucy and Rufus's only plan is to find this doc. So they set off, while Rufus makes his first report into his in-time Rittenhouse number. And he's told that once they find the doc, he is to destroy it. Lucy is able to track down the fabled Deep Throat and get some information from him, finding out that when the Watergate break-in happened, the thieves actually broke into a second room as well. And the only evidence left behind was a symbol leading them to a Black Power movement, which, luckily enough, was something that Rufus studied a lot in college because he was trying to get laid. And he's able to infiltrate this Black Power movement, and it turns out they have the doc. And he is able to have them lead him and Lucy to the doc. Unfortunately for everyone, the doc is not a document. It's actually a PhD, a person, a woman specifically. And thus we're going to get a story. But before that, let's jump back to Wyatt and Flynn, because that's the first story that we got in this episode. This is where Flynn tells us more about what happened to him prior to his disappearance 2 years ago after his wife and daughter were killed. supposedly by him. Now, according to Flynn, his story is that he was a good little NSA asset and that he was investigating some funny money down in the Cayman Islands. That money turned out to be linked to Connor Mason for a little project called a time machine. And he is able to trace this money and learns the name of Rittenhouse. Unfortunately, when he throws that name up the chain, 4 days later, his wife and daughter are murdered, and he's framed for it. Now, in my review, I think for the second episode, when Rufus first reveals that his mission is to wipe out Rittenhouse from the world, I had said that seemed a little impersonal. That there had to be a more personal reason behind all of this, because if nothing else, that's just how these shows work. Well, now it turns out he's actually trying to wipe out Rittenhouse from history in order to save his family. And he tries to connect to Wyatt through his own attempts to try to save his wife. Unfortunately for Flynn, he kind of pushes a few too many buttons by reading some of Lucy's comments in her journal about Wyatt and his obsession with his wife and whoever killed her. Now, as far as our second big story we get in this episode, it's from Doc herself, where she tells Lucy and Rufus that she was actually a member of Rittenhouse. She was born into it like pretty much everyone else, because Rittenhouse has been around for generations, specifically since 1778. That would be 2 years after the birth of the nation. Something that Flynn references later in his conversations with Wyatt, talking about how the country itself and Rittenhouse have been intertwined since the beginning. Hence why his missions have been what they have been thus far. But anyway, the doc is actually sort of a living document as well, because she is one of the only people outside of the upper management of Rittenhouse to actually know all of the identities of the people involved with Rittenhouse. She has a membership list in her head, and that's why everyone wants her. Some more dead than others. I don't take Rittenhouse as a organization that takes kindly to people leaving its membership. Now, as far as Rufus goes, he makes his next call into his contact number and is told that he once again needs to destroy the doc, even after he points out that the doc is a person, something he doesn't take too kindly to, and hangs up. And then promptly reveals his own secret to Lucy, that he has been spying on them because his family's been in trouble, which leads to further breakage of our trust between our teammates. I find it interesting that the show has spent the last 2 episodes really kind of building the bond between these characters, especially in the Alamo episode, where Rufus and Lucy team together to make sure that Wyatt doesn't get fired. And Lucy actually saves his life by talking him out of staying behind and dying with the rest of them in the Alamo. Now, in this specific conversation, when they're kind of trading jabs back and forth, I have to say Rufus sort of comes out ahead on this as far as I'm concerned, because he was doing quote-unquote bad things, but he was doing it because they were threatening his family. Lucy, on the other hand, was keeping secrets from the others for no discernible reason. She may have thought that Flynn was crazy, but she really doesn't have any good reasons to not tell them what she had been told about the journal and about this Rittenhouse organization. But in any event, Rufus and Lucy kind of partner together to tell their prospective threateners to where they need to go to get the document. Unfortunately for Flynn and Rittenhouse, they both go to the same location, which is no longer where the document is, thus leading to a pretty cool shootout that Flynn pretty much wipes the floor with him, that although he does have, better tech and better guns. And they basically end the mission by sending the doc off with the Black Power movement people to get her to San Diego so she can hopefully reunite with her family over in Asia. And unfortunately for our team, no one really trusts each other anymore, with Wyatt feeling pretty hurt at this point because he was basically betrayed, I think is a strong word. I mean, what Rufus was doing was probably the biggest betrayal, but again, he had the better reason for doing it. And I think Wyatt will understand that in the long term. His relationship with Lucy, however, her secrets were honestly not that big, but I can understand why he would be a little upset when his mission has been to kill Flynn, and she's had several conversations with him that she never told them about. Back in the present, Wyatt basically gives Rufus a new mission to be a double agent to spy on Rittenhouse while he continues to spy on Wyatt and Lucy, only now they know he's doing it. Sort of reminiscent to what Sam had to do in the first season of Burn Notice, if you're familiar with that show at all. If not, that was a useless reference, and I'm moving on now. We do learn a little tidbit after Rufus gets another card ride with our favorite Rittenhouse agent, and that the person he was talking to on the other side of the phone back in 1972 was in fact this very agent. And finally, in a development that I don't think surprised anybody, Lucy finally goes to visit her biological father. We see her in the beginning of the episode trying to build the courage to actually go and knock on the door. Well, at the end, she finally does, meets her biological father for the first time, a Benjamin Cahill, and unfortunately for her, she loses her courage and scampers away. But, as I said, the development that we all saw coming, he has some connection to this overall plot, because he promptly makes a phone call and rather smugly says, "Guess who just visited me?" Dun dun dun! Yes, we have, most likely he is going to be in Rittenhouse. I actually half expected her to ask Doc before she left whether Benjamin Cahill was on her list. I'm actually kind of surprised she didn't, but then again, there's really no reason for Lucy to suspect that her father is part of Rittenhouse, because she doesn't realize that she's part of a show that was pretty much an obvious development. So yeah, I can't really blame her for it, but I was just still kind of half expecting it. So usually at this point is when I would kind of dive into my 5 questions, but basically we've dived into them already, because this episode was nothing but primary questions and the long-term storylines. I mean, we never got to see Nixon. They never even got into the White House. This was all about the battle between Flynn and Rittenhouse and what Rittenhouse is, and we learned more about Rittenhouse than we have in pretty much all of the other episodes. We know they've been around since 1778. We know they were powerful enough that Nixon was scared of them, and if that doesn't scare you, I don't know what does. So with that, let me know what you thought of this episode. Did you think that these revelations were great? Do you think they were timely? I know the ratings haven't been great for this show, so I'm still hoping that we're going to get a full order and hopefully even a second season. I'm not ready to just lay bets on that yet. But again, what did you think of it? What did you think of the interactions between our characters, how they dealt with the various secrets being revealed? I really dug this episode. I thought it was good, and it was a nice change of pace. I don't want every episode to be like this, because it would frankly probably wear me out. I like the fact that we got 2 really good character building episodes, so when we had these secrets revealed, the trust issues felt genuine. And I really enjoyed the show as a whole. It's got good characters. They've done a good job of developing the long-term storylines, and they really had a lot of fun playing around with the various time periods that we've visited so far. As always, you can subscribe to my channel, check out some of my other TV and movie reviews, and until next time, be careful who you meet in dark parking garages.